Hello everyone, so here's a video on for loops in Java. So basically what for loops are is they are an alternative to while loops. Now it's not something you ever have to use. Anything you could do with a for loop you could technically do with a while loop, anything you could do with the while loop you could technically do with a for loop. They just give you a little more structure. And these end up being great when you need to do something a certain amount of times. So if you know you need to complete a task 50 times, or they're going to type in 20 entries, I want to do this 20 times. If you have that fixed number, a for loop gives you extra structure to actually set that up. So let's talk about what a for loop structure looks like. So it's going to look like this. So for example, you have for, and then what you're going to do here is you're going to declare a variable, and then you're going to have kind of your condition to run the loop. And then basically after every time through the loop, and these three parts are all separated with semicolons, you are going to, let's see, you're going to go ahead then and change the counting variable. Okay. And then of course you have your squigglies and your code just like usual. So as an example, let's say you set something up like this. So you declare some integer I is 0. That I is only accessible within that loop. And you're going to run this loop while I is, say, less than 100. Okay. And then after every time through the loop, we're going to do I equals I plus 1 or I plus plus, and then go through. And basically the process that we go through as we're going through a for loop is like this. First off, we set up, so step one, we set up the variable. So that's doing the I equals 0. And then what we do is we check to see if condition is true. So we check condition in the second part. And then if the condition is true, we run the code in the loop. And then step 4, we increment the variable. And then go back to step 2. So it's just like a structure of a while loop. So basically what happens is, okay, your first time through the loop, you set up I equals 0. And then you ask yourself, is 0 less than 100? Yes. So then you go ahead and run your code. And then after you've executed all the code in the squigglies, then you do the I equals I plus 1. So then you set I to equal 1. Because you did basically I plus plus. And then you see is 1 less than 100. So every time through again, we'll check this condition. 1's less than 100, yes, so then we run the code. And then we set I equals 2. We ask is 2 less than 100, and so forth. So it has a similar structure to a while loop in terms of like, while this condition is true, we're going to keep running through this loop. We just have this extra variable that we declare at the start, and we check every time throughout the loop. So let me go ahead and walk through a couple examples. So say we're celebrating, say, an anniversary with someone. My wife and my anniversary is in June, so we're a little ways away. But say I want to print out a message 365 times. So the way we typically do this is we start our counts at 0. I stands for index, and we do less than 300. Oops, I is less than 365. So what's going to happen here is just like with strings, we start counting at 0. So I starts at 0 and goes up to 364, which is a total of 365 times. Okay, so we start I is 0, I is less than 365. Every time through, we add 1 to it. So remember, that's I equals I plus 1. So I is 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. Okay, so as we go through, I'm just going to print out, say, the same message every time. So let's just say, happy anniversary. Okay, so again, what this does, I is 0, prints it out. Then it makes I 1. Is that less than 365? Yes, print it out. I 2, is that less than 365? Great. When I is 364, it prints it out. Makes it 365. Is it less than 365? No. And then after we're done with the loop, it just continues on with the program. Okay, so we'll see. We're not going to obviously sit here and count. Oopsie. We're not going to sit here and count, but when we run our code, we'll see it prints out roughly 365 times right there, and then it leaves the loop. Okay, now this is also good. Say you want to count from 1 to 100. Say you want to print the numbers from 1 to 100. Okay. So, by the way, you can only access this I within the loop. So this I is only accessible within this loop. So you're welcome to use I for the next loop if you want as well. I like to just have all my for loops use I, just because I'm lazy, but whatever you want. So if I want to count from 1 to 100, well, I'll start at 1. I will go, well, I is less than or equal to 100, and then every time I will add 1 to I. Okay, so that should be pretty straightforward. So if I just want to print out the numbers, we can actually see what I is doing. So I starts at 1 and then goes, well, it's less than or equal to 100. So this should give me every number from 1 up through 100. So let's go ahead and run that, and we'll see, like, yeah, it looks like it did every number. Okay, so that's pretty good. You can add other things, right? So if you want like a special message, for example, on the 50th one, so if I equals 50, I could print out and say, like, you know, this is Mr. Gravel's age. So if I want to have a secret message at a certain point in the loop, I can do that. So we can see hopefully there, yeah, like after 50, you see Gravel's age. Obviously, he's not 50, he's actually 62. So let's continue on. You can also modify I as you go through the loop. So for instance, say you just want to skip over your 60s, because like whatever. So you can change I as you go. So if you want to skip your 60s, that's something that you can actually do. So what'll happen there is you'll go ahead and do something like this. So you could just say if I equals 60, then in that case, I'll go ahead and do, okay, let's just set I to add 10 to it. So just add 10 immediately. You could even like set I to be 70. Like actually, let's just do that. It's probably easier. So I could just set I to be 70, and then it will continue on. And actually, that would skip 72, because after it's done with the loop, when it gets here, it'll do I++ to make it 71, and that'll be the next number we print out. So it's going to print out the number 60. Oh boy, I have too much stuff going on. It's going to print out the number 60, and then it adds 10 to 70, and then at the bottom of the loop, it does I++, and so forth. Okay, so what if you just wanted the even numbers? All right, so let's go ahead and comment some of this stuff out. These have all been going up by 1. So what if you just want evens? Now, you could do an if statement here, but say you just want even numbers, you could just go up by 2. So instead of doing an I++ every time, so I could just start at 0, go I is less than or equal to, say, 100, and then just do I equals I plus 2, and add 2 to my count every time. So that'll only give me the evens, and then I can see the value. So I is 0, and then I is 2, then I is 4, then 6, up to 100, and that's when it'll kind of leave the loop right there. Okay, so that's what's going on. One thing also worth noting, you can still do a break inside a for loop. Oh, jeez. You can still break in a for loop. So, for example, say you want to get to, like, you know, when I is equal to 60, like you're done, right? You're just retiring. So you could break out and that would stop at 60. So this isn't really that useful because most of the time your for loops are set up very carefully, so you only do it the right number of times, but that still works. Okay, now there's some cool things you could do. So you can use for loops to do experiments. So here's something I thought. You might be wondering, like, how random is math.random? So say you want an experiment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a bunch of random numbers. Okay, so I'm going to make, I don't know, say 10,000 numbers. 10,000 random numbers. And remember, of course, that if we do math.random, it gives us a decimal from 0 to 1. And I'm going to say, like, how many are below 0.5 and how many are above. So I'm going to run this code 10,000 times, but I need some variables to keep track of that. So I'm going to have some int for below to be 0. I'm going to have some int above to be 0 as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I want to go through this 10,000 times. So I set my I to be 0. I do my I is less than 10,000. And I'll just go up by 1 every time. Okay. So what I'm going to do every time through, so in each of my 10,000 trials, I generate a random number and see if it's above or below 0.5. Okay, so I'm going to make just a random number. So let's just do a double Renato, sorry, equals math.random. Okay, and then I'll just say if Renato is smaller than 0.5. So if I get a random number smaller than that, I'll add one to below. And then else, oh no, else I will add one to above. Okay, so that's going to run through. Also, this should be a for loop, not an if. That's my bad. So I'm going to run through this 10,000 times. Every time through, I'm going to make a new random number. Smaller than 0.5, I do below. And then bigger than 0.5, I do above. And this is going to help me see how random this actually is. And, you know, obviously, like, it's not going to be exactly 5,000, 5,000, but it's going to be pretty close to 5,000, 5,000. So, we're going to see, and of course, they'll be different each time, because every time I run this code, it's going to make 10,000 random numbers. But we're going to see it does a very good job of estimating, right? Yeah, it was off by like 100, but, you know, on a scale of 10,000, that's not much. So when I run this again and make 10,000 new random numbers, we see again, yeah, it's off by about 100. We'll keep going. Now it's off the other way by about 60. We could keep going. Here it's only off by 18. So that's just a way you can kind of do experiments, right? You just run something a bunch of times, and that's what a for loop can be useful for. Okay, so that's the video. Thanks for watching. I'll have more for you in the next video. Hope you enjoy your for loops.